The painting you see behind me was painted in 1774 by Thomas Leech. A view of Charlestown was supposed to represent Charleston at its height, right before the beginning of the American Revolution. This painting shows Charleston from the vantage point of Chutes Folly. If Leech would have turned around, he would have seen Sullivan's Island, the largest slave depot in the United States. Sullivan's Island was the quarantine point for enslaved people once they arrived in the Americas. It's also considered the African-American Ellis Island for the number of enslaved people who arrived through that port into the United States. Of the roughly 600,000 enslaved people trafficked to the United States, an estimated 40% were brought through Sullivan's Island. Leech's gorgeous perspective of Charleston is the same one these people would have seen from Sullivan's Island, though they surely felt an aching sense of dread as they looked towards the city. That important detail was invisible to our eyes in Thomas Leech's painting, as were the massive contributions of Africans and African Americans to the building of Charleston. Their presence in the city, their day-to-day lives and experiences, were covered up by the white perspective on what Charleston was. It makes you wonder about the hidden stories in our town. This is Salem Tavern, built in 1784. It was the first all-brick building constructed in Salem and was built for strangers, or non-Moravians, as they passed through the town on business. In fact, one of the most important strangers to come through the tavern was none other than George Washington, who'd visited here for 2 nights on his southern tour in 1791. There's a lot to see in this tavern, but there's a lot that you don't see as well. Thank you for choosing Salem Tavern. May I take your order? Our special tonight is like meat or something. Probably a vegetable, a slice of bread. You could have all those things and more in the tavern, but to whom would you be placing your order? Well, it was likely an enslaved black person. The labor of Africans and African Americans was the engine of this building. From the construction of it, to the cooks in the kitchen, to the people who were pouring your drinks and serving your food. They contributed in a number of invisible ways. That type of unacknowledged labor happened all across this town, with the lives and experiences of these black people covered up by the stories of white Moravians. Recognizing the need to undo those wrongs, Old Salem began researching and highlighting those experiences in an effort that would come to be known as the Hidden Town Project. Let's go to the tavern barn. I'll show you an example. When you look at this barn, what comes to mind? Pigs, horses, maybe goats? Well, how about people? In addition to serving as a resting place for animals, this barn also served as a sleeping quarters for enslaved people. The Hidden Town Project highlights this and has documented at least one instance in which 20 plus enslaved people slept inside this barn on their way from Georgia in 1780. You will find acknowledgments to this hidden legacy all over the town of Salem, highlighting the life experiences of both free and enslaved black people in the town. But wait, there's more. The suppression of black people didn't stop when slavery ended in the United States. There was, and still is, a concentrated effort to silence black voices, black joy, black experiences. Reconstruction, the time period following the end of the American Civil War in 1865 and lasting until 1877, was a significant period in civil rights progress for African Americans. 3 amendments to the Constitution were passed. The 13th Amendment, which banned slavery and involuntary servitude except as in punishment for a crime. The 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship and equal civil and legal rights to African Americans. And the 15th Amendment, which gave black men the right to vote. In 1877, the last of the federal troops were removed from the southern states, Without their presence to ensure that African American civil rights were being upheld, white supremacists immediately began attacking those rights. The most well-known of these acts occurred right here in North Carolina, when white supremacists violently overthrew the legally elected government of Wilmington in 1898. In what will become known as the Jim Crow era, Black people were stripped of their voting rights, targeted by oppressive laws meant to re-enslave them, and faced domestic terrorism on a regular basis. In the face of these challenges, African American people rallied their communities almost immediately and challenged Jim Crow at every level of government. The Civil Rights Movement, an organized effort to end racial discrimination and gain equal rights under the law, began in the late 1940s and ended when President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which put a legal end to segregation in the Jim Crow era. Racism and discrimination against African Americans did not end with the Civil Rights Act, but it was a massive step in the right direction. This is the choir stand of St. Philip's Moravian Church, the oldest African American church in North Carolina. To get up to this choir stand, you have to take a flight of stairs tucked away in the back of the sanctuary. If you don't know the layout of the building, you might not even know that they're there. It's hidden away from you. But when the choir starts to sing, you hear them and you notice their existence. And once you know that they exist, you can't ever forget that they're up there. The same logic applies to African American history. I've given you a few examples of hidden history. There are countless more across this country. And now that you know that they exist, I hope that you look for them in everything that you do.